Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions, where we're critical, not cynical, of the music we listen to. I'm your host, Bryan, and today we're going to be checking out a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is you want me to check out. If you have your own track you'd like to submit for special selection, you can find a link to do that in the description below. Today's comes at us from Jedediah. I think that's pronounced correctly. There's a song by the brave little Abacus called Pile, No Pile, Pile, and it holds a special place in my heart. Lyrics are definitely worth a look because it helps tie everything together. Not going to spoil anything, but I hope you enjoy it. Alright, so let's dive into this. We're looking at the track Pile, No Pile, Pile by the brave little Abacus. Let's see what they're bringing to the table. There's so much going on. This little jazzy piano lick. Really interesting bass lines. Really interesting melodic choices on the vocals. Even the This is interesting. The tonality is internally consistent on the vocals.
So now a relationship that was totally meaningless and trivial is over. Sorry to get too upset.
What? Why did that sound like Bryan Cranston? Okay, this is... That's it, right? Yep. A lot of silence there. I want to be completely transparent, as I like to be with y'all. I really don't have a strong grasp on this one. I'm primarily going to tell you what I heard with my ears, uh, and give my opinions on it. There were a couple of really neat things that I think I'm going to dig into and showcase some of the strengths of this track, but I'm honestly walking away from it just... It didn't connect with me. I think that's what I'm going to say. Um, but it is gutsy, and there's a lot of things I do want to praise about it. First, we just got to talk about the chaos of it all. This song utilizes layers with complete disregard for cohesion. I want to say that most of this stems from the production. I don't know when this track came out. I'm not gonna take that date. 2010. So, oh, actually, while I'm here, let me see if I can find a producer. Produced by the band. That explains some stuff. It has a sort of bedroom producer, bedroom musician vibe to it. Every layer that comes in at full strength, and the other layers are not re-EQ'd to deal with that. So what happens is that every instrument, once we start adding more and more layers, especially once we get to the end, the final 1.5 minutes of the track, when we have everything, we have the guitar, the piano, the bass, the drums, the trumpet, and the vocals, is that everything begins to sort of cancel each other out. It becomes difficult to hear anything. It doesn't quite hit that wall of sound where everything is present as a unified whole, but it's also not separated enough where I can pinpoint each individual instrument. There's a lot of bleed over and clashing and just sounds trying to dominate each other because they're all placed in the same or similar ranges and volume levels. The only thing that was done here on a production level to separate some of these ideas out is panning. The trumpet's off to the left, the piano's off to the right, the bass is centered, the drums are centered. There's a little bit of that going on, and it helps tremendously. This could have been a very messy, I was going to say chaotic mess, and I was like, yeah, it's not really chaotic. I was messy, and then I forgot I was using the word mess as my core noun there. Yes, it would just be a mess though, without any of that. The separation helps a ton, but it, at least to me, feels like somebody aiming for a lower fidelity type of production, or this is just the limit of their skills. And I say that as somebody who is very limited by my production skills. If you've listened to my last couple of tracks, uh, solid ideas in there. Just pat myself on the back there. But the execution is a little lacking, and I'm self-producing, and I'm not a producer. I've just picked up on this recently, so um, I don't say that to bring them down. I'm just observing that I see a lot of the same problems I deal with in trying to produce layers here. I can empathize with this, unless they're aiming for it, in which case there's no empathy, and they're much better than I am because I could not do this on purpose. It is very much on accident when I when I make something that sounds like this. Um, but we have all these layers, and they just clash production wise. Compositionally, though, I think there's some solid meat on the bones here. I do. There is certainly moments where there is a lot. The bass is constantly moving, and I love that. I pointed out some of the bass lines there, and um, it's solid. I love having a bass present in a band where it takes the lead. And it's not like, oh, we're going to give the bass the lead during the bridge and everybody else cuts out so you can hear it. No, it's a very busy section where the bass has some counterpoint against what the piano's doing. It is a core aspect of the band, a core voice in it, and it's given a melody line that isn't, it doesn't feel pandering. This isn't the bass section. The bass is just heard naturally and has a melody line to it. I really enjoy that. It's a beautiful part of the track. Um, but its line against the piano line as counterpoint is a bit rough. It's a bit stepping on each other's toes. Uh, they don't work perfectly in sync with each other, and that's not a bad thing. It can be used thematically, and the more that I think about this, it might be done on purpose. Um, but typically in the past, when I've talked about strong or good counterpoint, it's when the two melodies sound good on their own, but elevate each other when they're brought together. The dyads that are created when they play a note at the same time, and the back and forth that's created when they play within the breaks of the other voice, is what elevates it into a stronger melodic idea as a whole, where it's greater than the sum of its parts. This is just two parts. They don't feel greater, right? Might even detract a little bit at times, given that they clash very harshly in places. But for the most part, it's just two lines going off at the same time. They have very little interplay with each other. They're just going. The problem is when this is exacerbated by the layers, which I just spoke about. They just keep tossing them in there. And eventually we get another melody that goes along with this, and then even the vocals on top of these three, and it's just a lot of things going on against each other that don't play off of each other very well. And it ends up creating a lot of cacophony. Just several moments where there's so many moving lines going on that you don't really know who to pay attention to. The production isn't really showcasing any of them more than another. There's not really one spotlight or two spotlights. It's sort of just like using a floodlight to put on the stage and saying, pay attention to whatever floats your boat. And you're like, I don't know what I should be paying attention to because there's four different narratives going on at one time, and you can't understand them all, but you can't really focus on one either because this dude over here shouting now, and you're like, oh, what's that about? And now you're in the middle of a story over here that you didn't start. So that's what this feels like to me. And it lines up well with the production. I mentioned that the production has all of these different layers butting heads and really clashing with each other. But then we look at the compositional side and there's clashing there as well. There isn't a lot of attention paid to ensuring that there's space for all of these moving ideas. I've talked about before that the more melodic ideas, or especially the more moving ideas you put simultaneously, the more difficult it becomes to balance it to where it doesn't feel like every instrument is clashing, where they're stepping on each other's toes in this intricate dance, and that they're making space for every other voice. And working at four right here, this is a really good example of not putting that space in there, not putting the attention to all of the multiple melodic lines. Again, this could be entirely intentional. I don't have a lot of experience with the Brave Little Abacus. I don't know what they typically do. Maybe they have a song that shows, an expert understanding of four-way counterpoint, and this was intentionally designed to be clashing. I don't know, and I'm trying not to make any inference into it. I'm just pointing out specifically what is happening. The production and compositional components of these multi-layered melodies actively works against those around them. And it sort of diminishes it all into this just cacophony of sound. It's just a lot of noise coming out at once. And if you hone in on one idea, there's some solid ideas there, solid composition. It's just when it comes together as a whole, it's a bit of a mess. The next thing I want to talk about, though, what I think is interesting, is the vocals, because this adds another clashing component onto it. The clean vocals are rather consistently out of tune with the band. And at first, I thought it was just a case of not aiming for perfection. We have seen this before in other indie bands like the Microphones. I bring them up often because their lack of tonality with the instruments around them brought me to tears. They really went for an emotional vibe through that tonation control by purposefully, being out of tune with the instruments around them. Um, I don't know if that's going on here. Maybe this is a beautiful vocalist, just absolute perfect pitch. And here they're specifically aiming outside of that. But what I did find interesting was when the music cut away and we got just the vocals there at the end with a piano vamping back and forth between two chords underneath. The vocalist was in tune with themselves. There were some really interesting slides in there. Very rarely did the vocalist hit the note they wanted. They usually hit a note and slid up or slid down into their target note, which is cool. Again, I'm trying not to infer into it. I see this a lot when I was back at university with, people who are a bit rougher in the vocal area. You don't exactly have the muscle memory for hitting the E. You can get close to it though. So you hit that D flat and you slide into it. Um, but it's also very much an emo style of singing. This isn't the only band that utilizes vocals like this that has a lot of those sliding pitch ideas. So, where is the line drawn? Is this an artistic decision or is this a lack of skill? I don't know. I can't know. I mean, I can listen to more of their works, but I mean, it could be a very intentional sound, perfectly crafted from someone with masterful control over their vocal cords for an entire discography, right? But it does provide an interesting component to the vocal performance because it almost implies tonality or intonality in the performance itself because very few of the notes, I think, are going to be landed on perfectly. The target note will always be moved into, which means the attack of a syllable will typically be flat or sharp, which creates dissonance. So again, we have clashing ideas. The notes of our lead melody, and I don't even know if I can call them the lead melody because the vocals are pushed down into the mix so far that it's difficult to call them lead when the trumpet that I think is quiet has more volume and presence than our vocal does. Um, so that's an interesting choice all in there. But anyways, all these little decisions make for a vocal performance that clashes with everything else that's going on. And this pattern starts to emerge. Almost every decision is dissonance of some sort, whether it's tonal or rhythmic or spatial, production. There's just a lot of clashing elements here. And should I read that as intentional? Is this a band who is punching above their weight class? Are they trying to create something they lack the skills to do? 4-point counterpoint. Maybe the vocalist is a harsh vocalist and this is their first song doing cleans or the first album doing cleans and it's a bit rough because it's not their strong suit. Are they working outside of their skill level, which is what creates all this? Or is it all intentional to push a theme? And this is why I really try to be critical and not cynical with this channel because I don't know. I've certainly seen things, heard things technically on both ends of the spectrum. I have heard phenomenal musicians who are experts at their craft aim specifically for what would traditionally be poor musicianship or poor composition. And I have heard people who are not experts at their craft trying to do stuff above their skills and coming through with a varied a varied end result. And both I think are fascinating and I praise both as well. Especially on the bottom end of biting off more than you can chew. I think that shows ambition, and ambition to me is I tend to view that a little higher than just stagnating or just doing what you're good at. You got to push yourself out of your boundaries. I mean, that's this whole channel here. You guys have pushed me so far outside of my comfort as far as musical sounds, and I'm maybe not in the moment, but I'm happy to do that. You have to expand, you have to try new things, especially in your craft. If you're a creative type, whether it's art or music or film or dance or poetry, you've got to try new things. I mean, that's the whole thing behind my composition jam is pushing people into new avenues to try new styles of writing or whatever, to work with time signatures they've never worked with, because you've got to keep honing your craft and you can only do that by pushing yourself. So I really love it when bands try to make a concept album or music that is beyond what their skills are, because if nothing else, it's a learning experience for them, even if the end result is a bit rough around the edges. But I don't want to take a side here because I don't know the truth, but I do want to point this out that so much of this track feels like it's pointing towards a theme of clashing, of dissonance, of just things not working, things almost falling apart at times. It's such a through line in this track that it's hard to ignore. It feels intentional on every level. And I'm going to take that one step further. We've talked about a few different ideas here, but we haven't talked about rhythm. I think it was the third verse, the third time that our vocals kicked in. And things got really weird because they decided to just hold out some notes for random lengths. And of course, I say random loosely. I'm sure it's very planned for them. It sounds random to me. Sometimes it feels like it's a bar and a half of holding this note, and the rest of the band is on a 4-bar loop, and you just played a 6-beat phrase. Sorry, a 4-beat loop. You just played a 6-beat phrase. You've passed over the phrase line, and now you're beginning your next phrase in the middle of the rest of the band's loop. And the starts and the stops in the faster ideas between these long held out notes don't really line up with what the band is accenting. And we have this rhythmic clash and a phrasing clash coming on here. And again, there's so many things in here that feel like an amateur band, but I don't want to write them off as that because they are coming together to form a very solid idea. I feel like I need to listen to more Brave Little Abacus to get a stronger sense of who they are. But all of the clashing ideas here make for a song that's difficult to listen to. This is not mainstream palatable in so many facets. Um, and I want to praise that a little bit. They crafted this track, recorded it, mastered it, mixed it, listened to it, and probably thought, not a lot of people are going to like this. Most people are going to turn it off immediately. Let's release it to the world. And I have such admiration for that gutsiness to just do what you want to do, to make the art that your heart tells you to make and release it into the world knowing that most people are going to bounce off of it, and given the negativity of most people. I mean, 2010, we had MySpace by then. I think Facebook was out by 2010. Um, you know, negativity on the internet, Web 2.0 was starting up. We weren't in the positive realms of bulletin boards and GeoCities pages anymore. We were starting the negativity of Web 2.0, and knowing that people are just going to trash on it as far as mainstream ears go, and saying, you know what, this is us though. Let's throw it out into the void, see what happens. Just a lot of gutsiness to that, and I just have a huge admiration for that. I think that's it. Because once again, I don't really know what happened here. That's what I heard. I heard a lot of dissonance across a variety of components of the writing. Yeah, let's hit the lyrics. You're not listening. I said stop. Uh, is this like a call to the title? Because there's this back and forth, like pile, no pile, pile. Like, are we making one? Are we not? We have two opposing sides, and we start the song off with "I said stop." I don't know. Maybe we'll learn about that as we go on. Because it's come to be too much, I can't just pile aesthetic perspective dilemma, over analytic demeanors, feelings of lonely worthlessness, and unproductivity atop the other, allowing each to bleed through their fabricated boundaries and become one more thing to notice me. And this leads into the next verse. Notice me has a double meaning. Uh, almost feels like word salad at parts. I can't just pile aesthetic perceptive dilemma over analytic demeanors. And I think that's another double word, double entendre, because it says I can't pile these dilemmas over analytic demeanors, but over analytic is a single word. It's hyphenated. It is talking about demeanors that are over analytic. I feel like there's a lot of depth here. I don't know that I'm going to be able to do it justice. But it seems like we have somebody who is a very critical mind, maybe even overly critical, as their over analytic demeanor puts them at. And it causes them to. I mean, it might even be like a little bit of like a mental disorder, possibly, because it causes them to be underproductive or unproductive entirely, but also gives them feelings of loneliness and worthlessness. Um, and I wonder if there isn't a bunch of, there's obviously stress in here, a low self image. Um, I can't say a laziness though. There's an unproductivity. There's something that stops them from being productive despite having an over analytic demeanor. But it says that each of these individual problems are allowed to bleed into the others. Notice me before it's too late and too far away from when I dreamt of explaining to you that you are in everywhere. That cause these words I somehow type, my fingers, feet, and diaphragm all screaming. Notice me before it's too late, too far away from when I dreamt of explaining that you're everywhere, and that you cause these words for me to type and scream. So is there like an unrequited love here? Verse 1 was self deprecating in a sense, or maybe just hyper aware of one's own mental state. And verse 2 is maybe the cause of some of that, that there's this person that they like or want attention from for one reason or another, and they're not getting it. And it makes them feel worthless and it makes them lonely. Um, and then that leads into some of the other issues. Like I said, it bleeds into each other. But their feelings for this other person are typed into words and screamed. It's the cause of the song here. And as things grew more complicated, conscious expansion cultivated the books' ideas, songs' polyphony, texture, content dense around me. And unlike all the events staged, the puppeteered facade I'd made, this was naturally extraordinary and grabbed me from the ordinary, now perceived reduction theory of where we are. Unlike a lot of the rest of this stuff, this has a really nice syllabic flow to it. Just kind of rolls off the tongue. Everything else is a bit more rigid. But what this means, I don't know. From afar, it made less sense and appeared beautyless, which I guess is its defense. Not that any simple allegory transcends my inability to relate. It's this ability to relate that provides the social obligatory things that I want to relearn why we're friends again. I thought you knew. Not that any simple allegory transcends my inability to relate. And you know, this last verse might have been rather simple and I just can't pick up on it. But its simplicity doesn't mean that it's any less obscure to my reading of it. Really interesting that that comes in the first verse. I have difficult making any heads and tails of. I can pile one atop the other, it just feels bad. To realize you might hear something in the quietest of nights. There are two of me, and one of them will say, Hannah, way before now. 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 Yeah, I'm very lost on that. There are two of me, and one of them will say, Hannah, way before now. I don't know. There's a lot of metaphor in here, so I'm not going to take that one literally. I'm going to take it that there's two sides, or there's just a duality within this person, a conflict. The outro. Oh, yeah, the outro. So now a relationship that was totally meaningless and trivial is over. It's hard to get too upset. So is this about a relationship? I mean, I picked up on that, but I had like an unrequited love idea going on. Someone who felt lonely, wanting to be noticed by someone, and utilizing a lot of big words in hopes to attract them. Maybe not necessarily big words, but profound ideas. but is torn at the end for some reason. I don't know. Also, that outro sounded a lot like Bryan Cranston. Well, I don't know. It's been almost half an hour since I heard it. My memory doesn't sound so much like Bryan Cranston. Maybe I misheard that. That's what I said back then, though. I might be wrong, though. But it didn't sound like our singer. That's for sure. Maybe there was someone else in the band who does a pretty good impersonation, or just happened to sound similar to him. I don't know. This is an interesting song, and I think the lyrics kind of have clashing elements as well. There's an aspect of the lyrics that wants to be understood. There's certain lines that feel very direct and surface level, and then there's other entire verses that feel completely word salady, where I kind of I see how some of the words go together in phrases, but the sentences they form aren't making any sense to me. There's it feels very personal. I mean, what art isn't, but lyricists will typically try to make their lyrics relatable. You don't make a song about your ex. You make a song about having an ex or just the idea of an ex, but not your specific ex with her or his specific attributes or names. It's the general concept of it, something more relatable. This doesn't feel like that. This feels like a song about a specific person and not about the concept of a relationship of who that person was to our lyricist. And through that, I think there's going to be quite a few lines which I'm not supposed to get. Maybe if I know about these people and listen to interviews or whatever, I might be able to get in on some of these inside jokes or metaphors. But the intention is not specifically for me to get it. This whole story about piling things, whether it is um, piling something. In verse 4, I can pile one atop the other. It just feels bad. Not sure what that means. But we also have piling mental issues or emotional feelings on top of one another in a sense that they can bleed together through their boundaries. Um, Even the title of the track, Pile, No Pile, Pile, kind of relates loosely to some of the ideas in this track, but doesn't really have a strong connection, at least not from what I can see from an outside view. There's so many elements that make it look like a simple allegory, but, well, a simple metaphor, I should suppose, of ideas and feelings and things getting piled up and becoming difficult to balance, maybe in a sense. But no matter how simple the metaphor actually is, that doesn't change my inability to understand it because I'm still missing core information. Those are my thoughts on the Brave Little Abacus's Pile, No Pile, Pile. This is where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed this or not, anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to add on to what I said, or correct me on. If you have any extra information into this one, I am all ears. I have a really difficult time connecting anything. I told you guys what I heard, but if you have more information, or if you just have a stronger relationship to the track, maybe you've heard it 100 times and it clicks after the 99th, let me know your perspective on all of it. Above that, if you could, head into the description box. You'll find a link for Linktree in there, which takes you to this menu. Has links for everything related to the channel, including ways to support the channel and ways to join communities around the channel, such as Twitter and Discord. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. That wraps it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. As usual, we will continue on with music inspired by week as well as another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.